Judy Garland's fall from grace was as public as her meteoric rise. The darling of MGM's golden age, her voice once symbolized Hollywood's grandest dreams. But behind the curtain there was a different story, one of relentless exploitation. Fed amphetamines as a teenager to keep up with grueling shooting schedules, she spiraled into substance dependence. By the early 1950s, her contracts were gone, her voice faltered, and Hollywood turned its back. Deemed uninsurable, a death sentence in the industry, Garland was cast aside. Yet, in 1954, she roared back with A Star is Born, delivering a raw, unfiltered performance that mirrored her own agony. The world saw her brilliance, but Hollywood wasn't ready for a comeback this bold. Despite critical acclaim, the Academy denied her an Oscar win, a slap that echoed louder than any applause. But Judy proved something far greater. Hollywood could underestimate her, but it could never erase her. She was not just a star, she was a legend, burning bright long after the lights of Tinseltown tried to dim her. Bette Davis was never meant to play by Hollywood's rules. She was meant to rewrite them. In an era when actresses were expected to be beautiful, obedient, and replaceable, Davis was none of the three. With eyes that burned through the screen and a talent that left directors scrambling to keep up, she rose to stardom in the 1930s. But Hollywood had a way of punishing women who demanded more. When Warner Brothers tried to shackle her with mediocre roles, she fought back, suing the studio in a move unheard of at the time. She lost the case but won the war, emerging stronger, sharper, and hungrier than ever. By the late 1940s, however, the industry had begun to turn on her. The scripts dried up, the roles grew thinner, and whispers of her being difficult overshadowed her talent. Then came 1950's All About Eve, a role that wasn't just a comeback but a coronation. As Margot Channing, she wasn't acting. She was making a statement. Hollywood had tried to push her aside, but Bette Davis didn't fade, she fought. And in doing so, she didn't just survive the golden age. She outlived it, proving that true legends don't bow, they reign. Gloria Swanson wasn't just a star of the silent era. She was its queen. With her hypnotic gaze and opulent costumes, she ruled Hollywood in the 1920s, commanding salaries that dwarfed those of her male co-stars. But then came the sound revolution, and like so many silent film icons, she was left behind. The industry that once worshipped her now whispered that she was outdated, a relic of a forgotten time. By the 1930s, Swanson had vanished from the silver screen, retreating into business ventures while younger actresses took the spotlight. Hollywood had moved on, but in 1950, she staged a comeback so legendary, it became the very definition of cinematic irony. In Sunset Boulevard, she didn't just play a forgotten star, she embodied one. Her performance as Norma Desmond was haunting, raw, and all too real. The industry that had cast her aside now couldn't stop talking about her. Though she didn't win the Oscar, Swanson's legacy was sealed. She proved that true stars don't fade, they wait for the right spotlight. And when it came, she stepped back into it with a performance that made sure Hollywood would never forget her name. Lana Turner wasn't just a movie star. She was Hollywood's ultimate dream girl. With her platinum blonde hair and smoldering presence, she captivated audiences in the 1940s, becoming MGM's most bankable leading lady. But behind the glamour, her life was a storm of scandals, heartbreaks, and dark twists that even Hollywood couldn't script. By the late 1950s, Turner's career was teetering on the edge. Studios whispered that she was past her prime, but fate had one final, shocking twist in store. In 1958, her teenage daughter stabbed and killed Turner's abusive lover, gangster Johnny Stompanato, in an act of self-defense. The scandal was front-page news, threatening to bury her career for good. But Hollywood loves a comeback. Just a year later, Turner delivered the most powerful performance of her career in Imitation of Life, 1959, a heartbreaking tale of sacrifice and redemption. The film became a box office sensation, proving that Lana Turner wasn't just a scandal. She was a survivor. She had faced the abyss, and instead of fading, she turned tragedy into triumph. That was the power of Lana Turner. She wasn't just a Hollywood star, she was Hollywood itself. Rita Hayworth wasn't just a star, she was an era. The beloved goddess of Hollywood's golden age, she set the screen on fire with her beauty, grace, and undeniable magnetism. With Gilda, 1946, she became the ultimate femme fatale, a symbol of desire and mystery. But behind the luminous smile was a woman trapped in a system that saw her as a commodity, not a person. Born Margarita Cancino, she was forced to erase her Latin heritage, her hairline painfully electrocuted, her identity rewritten to fit Hollywood's mold. At the height of her fame, she was one of the most photographed women in the world. Yet privately, she battled heartbreak, abusive relationships, and the pressures of an industry that demanded perfection. By the mid-1950s, Hayworth's career was unraveling. Failed marriages, financial struggles, and battles with alcoholism led many to write her off. Hollywood had moved on, but Hayworth wasn't done yet. In Separate Tables, 1958, she delivered a haunting, vulnerable performance, reminding the world why she was an icon. Though her later years were marred by personal struggles and early-onset Alzheimer's, long before the world understood the disease, her legacy was untouchable. Rita Hayworth wasn't just a Hollywood goddess. She was proof that even in tragedy, true stars never fade. Marlene Dietrich wasn't just a movie star. She was a force of nature. With her husky voice, androgynous style, and smoldering gaze, she shattered Hollywood's conventions and redefined femininity on her own terms. In The Blue Angel, 1930, she became an overnight sensation, a siren of seduction draped in shadows and mystery. But Hollywood is a fickle lover. By the late 1930s, Dietrich was labeled box office poison. Her career teetered on the edge, and studios began turning their backs. Most stars would have faded into obscurity, but Dietrich was not most stars. She reinvented herself. With Destry Rides Again, 1939, she reclaimed her place, proving she wasn't just a glamorous enigma. She was a powerhouse performer. When war came, she didn't hide behind the silver screen. She risked everything, performing for Allied troops on the front lines, defying Hitler, and rejecting the Nazi regime despite being one of Germany's most famous exports. Hollywood's rejection meant nothing when she was fighting for something greater. In the 1950s, as leading roles dwindled, she transformed once again, this time into a legendary cabaret performer. Draped in sequins and wrapped in spotlight, she captivated audiences worldwide, proving reinvention was her greatest role. Marlene Dietrich was more than a star. She was rebellion, resilience, and reinvention, wrapped in a whisper of smoke and the glint of a top hat. Clara Bow wasn't just a silent film star, she was the star, the roaring heart of the 1920s. With her flapper spirit, infectious energy, and undeniable magnetism, she became Hollywood's first true bit girl. Wings, 1927, made her a sensation, and with it, 1927, she defined an entire generation's idea of modern allure. But fame is a double-edged sword. As Hollywood transitioned to talkies, Clara's thick Brooklyn accent became a cruel punchline in an industry that had once worshipped her. The press, which had built her up, now reveled in tearing her down. Scandal after scandal, relentless scrutiny, and whispers that she was too wild for the new Hollywood. By the early 1930s, the same studios that once chased her now saw her as a relic of a bygone era. Yet Clara refused to be destroyed by the machine. She left on her own terms, retreating from the industry that had both adored and exploited her. Unlike so many fallen stars, she didn't cling to past glories. She built a new life away from the cameras, finding peace beyond the spotlight. Clara Bow may have vanished from Hollywood, but she never truly faded. She wasn't just an icon of the silent era. She was its beating heart, a spirit too wild, too free, and too unforgettable to ever be silenced. Mae West didn't just break the rules. She rewrote them. In an era when women were expected to be demure, she strutted onto the screen dripping in diamonds, delivering one-liners sharper than a knife. She was Hollywood's queen of innuendo, a woman who turned sex appeal into power and scandal into success. Her films like She Done 'Em Wrong, 1933, and I'm No Angel, 1933, didn't just push boundaries. They shattered them, saving Paramount Pictures from bankruptcy in the process. But Hollywood and the censors weren't ready for Mae West. The Hays Code slammed down hard in 1934, gutting her scripts and stripping away the double entendres that made her a star. By the early 1940s, the industry she had once ruled had turned its back, branding her too dangerous for the silver screen. Most would have faded into obscurity. Mae West, she reinvented herself. She took Las Vegas by storm, dominated radio, and even made a Hollywood comeback in the 1970s, still draped in diamonds, still delivering lines with that signature smirk. Mae West wasn't just a star. She was a force of nature. And no censorship board, no scandal, and no industry exile could ever dim her glow. Errol Flynn wasn't just a movie star. He was Hollywood's ultimate swashbuckler, the man who turned adventure into an art form. With his devil-may-care grin and effortless charm, Flynn soared through the golden age, bringing legends like Robin Hood and Captain Blood to life. His on-screen heroics weren't just roles. They were reflections of the wild, reckless man behind the mask. But Hollywood's golden boy had a dark side. Scandals, lawsuits, and an insatiable appetite for excess turned his life into tabloid fodder. By the late 1940s, Flynn's star was fading. His once athletic frame weakened from years of hard living, and the studios that once worshipped him now saw him as a liability. Yet, like any great hero, Flynn refused to vanish quietly. Reinventing himself in Europe, he carved out a new chapter, proving his talent wasn't just about swordplay and stunts. His final films, raw and introspective, revealed the depth Hollywood had overlooked. Though he died young, Flynn's legend never dimmed. He wasn't just a matinee idol. He was a myth larger than life, forever etched in the golden glow of cinema. Gloria Stewart was Hollywood's golden girl of the 1930s, a leading lady with elegance, talent, and a face made for the silver screen. She starred alongside cinema giants, from Claude Rains in The Invisible Man to Lionel Barrymore in The Old Dark House. But despite her luminous presence, the fickle tides of Hollywood didn't favor her. By the early 1940s, the roles dwindled and Stewart, tired of the industry's indifference, walked away. For decades, she lived outside the Hollywood spotlight, turning her passion toward painting and the quiet joys of life. To the world, she was a forgotten star, a name lost to time. Then, in 1997, at the age of 87, she did the impossible. Cast as the older Rose in Titanic, Stewart delivered a performance so moving, so timeless, that Hollywood had no choice but to remember her. An Oscar nomination followed, making her the oldest nominee in history at the time. The forgotten star of the Golden Age had returned, not just with a role, but with a legacy. Gloria Stewart wasn't lost to history. She became history.